All right. Everybody take a seat. Everybody get seated. Hello. Welcome to the Sharkstream Book Club. It's me. It's Gage. Wouldn't you know it? Back at it again. Reading more words. So many words. That's what books are made of, you know. Words. And paper, ink, card stock usually. If it's a hardcover, it's got like a what are hardcovers made out of? Cardboard? It's sometimes got like a fabric on it. Maybe a nice dust jacket. You know what I've been doing recently? Because I try to get hardcovers when I can. Goodness gracious, this is already maybe a little bit louder than I was anticipating. So I try to get hardcovers when I can. Because I like having hardcovers. They feel a lot better to hold. I like the weight of it. It's all about tactile sensation, you know? What I've been doing recently is whenever I've read a hardcover book, I've been removing the dust jacket completely. I used to be one of those people that would be like, oh, I'm going to use the dust jacket to mark my place. But I've kind of, as I've kind of gone on, I've sort of fallen off of that a little bit. Just because, I find it is a little bit more convenient and maintains, the integral quality of all parts of the book to just use a fucking bookmark, you know? You dig? You hear what I'm saying? You picking up what I'm putting down? So now, of course, I don't have anything to do with, the dust jackets, and, as I'm holding the book, the dust jacket's kind of, slipping out of my hands and everything like that. So I've just been taking them off, honestly. I think I started doing this with the Twin Peaks books, The Secret History and The Final Dossier. And part of that is because the dust jackets for those only come up, halfway up the cover of the book. So they're, double fucking inconvenient to have on there. So I would just take them off, and then as I started reading other books, I'm trying to think, what else would I have read? Nona the Ninth, probably. Ninth House, you know? I've started just Road to Neverwinter, Druid's Call. I've started just removing the dust jacket. Just be like, get this fucking thing out of here. And it's not that I, dislike them or anything now. It's just that, I don't really need them, if I'm being entirely honest. I don't need them on the book while I'm reading it, I suppose is what I should say. You know? But that's neither here nor there, because the Alan Wake novelization is paperback. So it doesn't have a dust jacket. It's just kind of, floppy, like a disc. Like a floppy disc. What the fuck am I talking about? We're reading more of the Alan Wake novelization today. Last time, I believe, we ended on Wake's encounter with the possessed Stucky in the logging camp. So we're about roughly halfway through episode 1 of the game, in terms of where we are in the story. We'll likely finish that today. I should plug my phone in, because what do I got? I got 16% battery. What on earth is this? Okay. Friend of the stream, Audrey, retweeted something having to do with VTuber cat paws and toe beans. It's just like, it's the sort of thing that's like set to like keybind, so it's like you're playing a video game with a cat's toe beans. Which, I mean, that's cute. Okay, phone charge cord, got it. Okay. We'll probably run for about 2.5 hours today. I don't really want to, like... As much as I want to be able to get through this novelization and, the Alan Wake files with enough time to, like, also stream Control every other week or so, if I do that, I might switch that to Thursdays if I have a free slot. I also, I mean, I've been pretty busy the last couple days. Which, you know, is it happens, but like, I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm working, so my job's got me on a 4-day work schedule now. I work 4 10-hour shifts. It's not too bad. It's basically like I'm working an hour longer than I would on a normal day. And like my last half hour is mostly pretty relaxed, just like taking care of like non-phone things for the most part. So it's not so bad. And I thought, okay, this is great. That leaves me with like 3 days to like take care of things, schedule appointments I have to, you know, that sort of thing. And what I'm realizing is that, hey, when you have 3 days and you decide to like pack everything you need to do into those 3 days, they don't really feel like days off anymore. So I'm kind of dealing with that a little bit. So I'm trying to keep these particular streams, unlike the days that I have off, from going too long, so I can still, to some degree, enjoy my day off. You know what I mean? I didn't finish watching Transformers 2 yesterday. I mentioned on yesterday's stream I had started watching Transformers 2 because it was my movie for the day, and I didn't finish it, and I just finished it today. I don't know how I forgot. I completely forgot about the part of that fucking movie where Sam Witwicky dies and goes to Autobot heaven. Like, I don't know how I forgot that. That's kind of a wild thing to just let slip my mind. Of all the fucking whack-ass shit that happens in that movie, the fact that I forgot about Autobot heaven is kind of nuts. Because it is by far the most absurd thing that happens. Quite possibly. But now that I've finished it, I can move on to Dark of the Moon, ideally probably like this evening once I've finished up this stream. And then tomorrow is... oh god, what is tomorrow? Age of Extinction? And then day after that is The Last Night. And then my suffering will be over and I can finally fucking watch Bumblebee. We got Rise of the Beasts coming out next month. I'm excited for that. I want to see my boy Cheetor. I really liked Beast Wars when I was a kid. Like, I wasn't so into it that it, like, formed a integral part of my personality. Although the fact that I'm a furry might have been a result of that, potentially. What, you mean animals can also be, like, little guys? That's cool. I feel like Beast Wars to Furry Pipeline is maybe not as, like... it's probably not quite as direct as, say, like, Sonic to Furry Pipeline, or, like, Biker Mice from Mars to Furry Pipeline, of which I can count myself as proud denizens of both of those. But I feel like it's definitely, like, you get there eventually. There's maybe some turns that there's maybe some, like, forks in the road where it's just like, you go this way, you're a furry, you go this way, you're a robot fucker. But if you go the robot fucker direction, you can also turn back to furry if you want. There's a lot of variation and permutations here that we could go with. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 6. Why is my phone buzzing right now? Pizza Hut. Wake stumbled down the trail out of the logging camp, looking over his shoulder every few steps to see if he was being chased. Nothing and nobody there. He stopped under a flickering overhead light, catching his breath. Whatever those things were, they didn't like the light. He was safe here. He turned off his flashlight, rested one hand on the rail fence that ran partially along the ridge. The trail led through an opening in the fence, winding steeply down into the forest. Wake could see the glow of the gas station in the distance. Stucky's gas station, its owner hopefully now lying under the bulldozer at the bottom of the ravine. What had Stucky been doing here? He lingered in the light, knowing that he needed to go down through the forest to reach the gas station, but unwilling to leave the comfort of the light. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick and make a gross noise. 1 second. Okay. He glanced back up the trail to the logging camp, gripping the revolver so hard it made his hand hurt. Still unwilling to start down the path into the darkness, Wake pulled out the crumpled manuscript page from Departure that he had found in the trailer. The page described a character fighting the same enemies that had attacked him in the logging camp. A character who discovered that it took light to strip away the enemy's protective darkness and kill them with gunshots. Enemies that disappeared after dying, leaving not a trace behind. Wake shivered under the light, not sure if he was in shock from fighting for his life, or from the fact that these manuscript pages that he kept finding, pages from a novel he didn't remember writing, seemed to be true. Taken. That's what the page called the creatures who had attacked him. An indication that the men they had been before were now absent. Absent? Sent by abs? Absinthe? Absent. Fathers, sons, they were gone now, taken over. The monsters Wake had killed in the logging yard had been just like that, their movements stilted, their eyes black pits devoid of humanity. Wake took another long look at the glow from Stucky's gas station, trying to fix the direction he needed to travel in his head. Once he entered the forest, he wouldn't be able to see it, not all the time anyway, and there were a lot of trails to choose from. He'd have to do the best he could. The time to seek perfection was when he was sitting at his desk, typing away. This was real. Funny, that last thought. Yesterday he would have said that it was what he created sitting at his desk that was real, not this. Even though he hadn't written a word in years, he still thought of his fictional world as more real than the one he woke up to every morning. Not anymore. He kicked at the gravel, sent stones skittering into the darkness. This was the real world, the one Alice had been stolen from. Wake left the light and started cautiously down the steep path, struggling not to slip on the loose gravel. The moonlight thinned out as the trees thickened around him. He stopped and listened, looked back. The overhead light flickered through the trees. Last chance, Wake. You could run back there and wait under the light until morning. Stay safe. He had intellectually understood Alice's fear of the dark, remembered his own night terrors as a child, afraid of what lurked in the closet or under his bed. His mother had comforted him with a placebo he had treated Alice's fear the same way, considered it a simple phobia, no more grounded in reality than being scared of butterflies or Friday the 13th. Not anymore. It took an effort to stop his teeth from chattering as he looked around at the night. Wake finally understood that he had been right as a child, that the darkness truly did shelter all manner of evil. No wonder the first great discovery of humanity had been fire, not simply for heat or because cooked meat tasted better than raw, but for light. To light the night and keep darkness at bay, that was the only law, the beginning of wisdom, But Wake didn't have that luxury. He couldn't stay in the light, not if he was going to get Alice back. Wake started walking. Walk started waking. Wake started walking. He was going... He fucking shit, goddamn. He was a lot of things. Erratic and short-tempered and egotistical, selfish even, but he was no coward. When it came to Alice, there was nothing he wouldn't do, no risk too great, that he wouldn't take it if it would save her. He could hear a rushing river nearby, the dampness permeating the air. He used his flashlight sparingly, not sure how long the batteries would last, knowing only that he would need it again if he were attacked. He still had no idea what he was going up against. These men, these taken, once men, loggers, hunters, Stucky himself, who owned the gas station and rented cabins, what had happened to them? What was the darkness that protected them, wrapped around them in an oily cocoon? Wake had questions, but no answers. He kept walking, on high alert, listening, but there was only the wind in the trees and the sound of the river growing louder now. The woods suddenly shook. What the? Wake put his hands to his head, trying to block out the sound, a roaring in his ears, like something awakening after a long sleep, something enormous. Excuse me. He staggered, the sound ending as abruptly as it started, the woods utterly still now, silent except for the sound of a bird shrieking in the distance. He moved forward, dazed, walked off the path and into the weeds. He stopped, seeing a boulder to his right, splashed with glowing paint, the words "Raise high the lantern" dribbling across the surface of the rock. He looked around, realized he was on the brink of walking off the edge into the river far below. He stepped back from the edge, heart pounding. Have to be careful out here. Careful of everything. Wake noticed a path wound back the way he had come. If he was going to reach the gas station, he was going to have to cross the river. There was no bridge, none that he could see anyway, but there was a huge fallen tree that reached from one side of the river to the other. Wake walked over to the tree. It looked slippery with moss and lichen, but he put one foot on the thick trunk. He could just walk across it, plenty of room, if he were Indiana Jones or Tarzan. What? Whatever. He looked back toward the logging camp. Still time to retreat to the overhead light and wait until dawn, Wake. No one would know. Of course he would know, and that was enough. He put the pistol into one pocket of his jacket, slipped the flashlight in the other. He stepped up onto the log. It bounced a little. The log probably weighed a ton. It wasn't going anywhere. One slip, however, and Wake would be falling a couple 100 feet to the river and the rocks below. Too scared to take a deep breath, he slowly started across the log, arms outstretched like a tightrope walker. The bark of the log was rough, bits flaking off with every step, drifting down. In the movies, they always warned people in this kind of situation not to look down, but how was he supposed to cross without looking where he was stepping? He tried to focus on his feet, swaying slightly as he moved. Alright, real quick aside here. Video games like to do this. You know, the tightrope walk, generally combined with some manner of balance mechanic. If you have to walk across a log like this, don't do it standing upright. Okay? Because, like, you want to get your center of gravity as close to the log as possible. So the ideal thing would be to lay down and shimmy across on your belly. This is unfortunately not incredibly cinematic and doesn't look as cool, so video games will never adopt this. But, you know, such is life. Halfway across, away from the surrounding trees, it was lighter, and he made the mistake of letting his attention stray to the river itself, the water dark and swirling, reflecting the stars overhead. It made Wake dizzy. Stars above, stars below, and Wake caught somewhere in between. Alice, she was someplace else. I gotta make a gross noise real quick. Alright. He imagined her sinking into Cauldron Lake, the water like black glass, Alice getting smaller and smaller as she fell into darkness. He felt he might be sick. Legs shaking, Wake was forced to crawl on his hands and knees across the log. See? That's what you do. Told himself not to look at the river or the stars or anything else but the other side. That was a way to find Alice. He kept going. He should have been, honest, he should have been doing it from the start. Should have been doing it from the start. But you know what? He's not a smart man. He's just an angry man. When he finally crawled off the log and onto solid ground, he lay there, panting, eyes closed. He would have liked to stay like that, pretend this was all a dream, a nightmare, a horror story his mind had cooked up without telling him. Yeah. But it wasn't, and he couldn't stay here. Well, I mean, sure. You're half right. You can't stay there, but you did think this one. We'll get to it. Wake got up. He felt better now, as though every challenge met, every fear conquered, made him stronger. He had to be strong. There was a path here, one that led in the direction of the faint glow in the trees. Stucky's gas station. He snapped on the flashlight. Nothing. Fighting back panic, he shook the flashlight, tried it again. The beam shot into the trees. He switched it off, glad that it was working again, but there was an certain uneasiness now. He no longer trusted the light. He looked back, half expecting a logger, a taken, to be sauntering across the log, twirling a double-bladed axe. He was alone, though, for now. The trail was easy to follow, and he saw more rocks splashed with luminous paint. Some of the messages on the rocks warned about the darkness or encouraged staying in the light. Some simply showed an arrow pointing the path that should be followed. Wake wondered who had left the markings, but he had other priorities now. He made good time, trying not to use the flashlight. He told himself he was saving the batteries, but part of him felt the light alerted the taken to his presence. Best to keep going in the dim light of the moon and stars. Bushes rustled up ahead, and Wake jerked, plastering himself against one of the trees that lined the path. He stayed there, trying not to breathe, trying to quiet his heart. More rustling in the underbrush, chipmunks, squirrels gathering nuts for winter. Wake would settle for a ravenous grizzly bear being out there. Anything other than what he had encountered back at the logging camp. The wind kicked up, carrying the sound of water splashing from the river. That in a manic, distorted voice. Sparkling River Estates. That's where I go when I want something special to eat. It was Stucky. Wake hurried along the path, trying to put some distance between himself and the river. Paul makes the best hot dogs in the state, crooned Stucky, closer now. It says Belly Buster in the book, but it's Belly Burster in the video game. Also, hi, G-Man. Belly Buster is the best with no contest. Monster Dog is second best. They skip the part where he says that the famous dog was third best, which I always think is very funny. How you gonna make something called the famous dog and it's your third best hot dog? Honestly. Wake ran. He could see the light from the gas station through the trees. He tripped on a root, sprawled across the path, and scrambled up, hands scraped. He pulled the revolver and the flashlight from his jacket, started running again. Never touch salad, though, babbled Stucky, his voice distant now, fading. Man like me needs a hefty meal to get through the day. Wake ran on, the path twisting and turning through the trees, branches brushing against him as he raced headlong along through the forest. The gas station was in view now, just beyond a patch of trees. He was breathing hard, panting, not trying to be quiet, just trying to put as much space between him and Stucky as possible. All he had to do was get to the lights of the gas station, and Stucky stepped out of the shadows ahead, right in the middle of the path, backlit by the light from his gas station, his face crawling with darkness. You gotta change your oil more often, he wheezed, slapping an enormous pipe wrench into the palm of his hand. Wake back stumbled? Is that right? Stumbled back? Back stumble. And Stucky rushed him as he scrambled up. He felt the pipe wrench slam into his shoulder and almost dropped the flashlight. His whole arm went numb. Changing a spark plug is not as simple and safe as you might think, said Stucky, swinging at Wake again, just missing him. It can be dangerous. Wake shined the flashlight on Stucky, saw the Taken's face boiling like hot tar. Stucky backed up, and it was Wake who advanced now. The flashlight flickered, died. Wake smacked it against his leg, and the light came back on. He still had no feeling in his hand, his shoulder aching. Stucky stepped into the trees, an arm thrown over his face. Wake heard him crashing through the underbrush, then saw Stucky burst from the thorn bushes behind him. Wake ran for the gas station, his side aching from the effort, stitching up on him. Even with the hood open, the engine block takes hours to cool, shrieked Stucky, getting closer. Wake kept running, but the gas station was too far away. He'd never reach it in time. You should always leave the job to a professional, howled Stucky. Wake whirled, saw Stucky not more than a few steps behind, the pipe wrench raised with both hands. He slashed the beam of the flashlight across Stucky, watched him twist away. Change your oil, bellowed Stucky, charging hysterically, swinging the pipe wrench as the flashlight tore the shroud of darkness that covered him. Wake shot Stucky, close enough to see him stagger, his eyelids fluttering in the glare. He kept the beam on Stucky, pinning him as he shot him again and again and again. Shot him until the revolver clicked on empty cylinders, and Wake still kept dry-firing it, even after the taken had dissolved in the night. Wake finally lowered the revolver, staring at the spot where Stucky had been. There was no trace of him, though when he briefly closed his eyes, he could see the glowing afterimage of a man on fire. He turned and hurried toward the bright lights of the gas station, Stucky's gas station. Wake could still hear the man's last words ringing in his ears, demanding Wake change his oil. Brambles tore at Wake's arms and legs, but he ignored the pain in his haste. When he finally emerged from the woods and onto the outskirts of the station, he had to resist the impulse to kiss the blacktop. He walked forward more slowly now, as if he moved too fast. As if he moved too fast, the gas station and all his hopes would fade away. A Deerfest float was parked on the outskirts of the station, right on the edge of darkness. The same one that he and Alice had spotted when they got off the ferry yesterday. The giant deer head on the float looked menacing in the darkness, its eyes burning with a weird light as it stared back at him. The front of the gas station looked peaceful, a deserted, well-lit station in the middle of nowhere with 3 pumps and an upright soft drink machine. A large sign read Stuckies. A smaller sign announced Premium Cabins for Rent, a non-refundable reservation deposit required. Wake didn't care about those 2 signs. What grabbed his attention was a countdown banner over the gas pumps. Deerfest in 7 days. The number was a separate, changeable Velcro patch. Wake rubbed his forehead. Deerfest had been 2 weeks away when he and Alice had arrived. If the day count of the banner was correct, Wake had lost a whole week between the night they got to Bright Falls and now. If the banner was correct, it meant that Alice had been missing for a week. Wake hesitantly touched the banner. It was real. He jumped as a radio close to the front door suddenly squawked to life, spitting static. A sign on the door said closed, but the lights were on in the shop, the garage doors wide open. Wake gently turned the radio dial, wanting to hear a human voice. Any voice. This is Pat Main, your host at KBF-FM, the Night Owl. Well, I was just outside for a breath of fresh air, and what a night. Crackle of static. But if you're still up and around, take a moment. Step outside for a spell and breathe in deep. The weather is absolutely still. Static. Like the forest is quietly breathing along with you. On nights like this, I wish I wasn't cooped up in the studio, but here I am, and who'd keep you company all night long if I weren't? Oh, and it looks like I'm not the only one staying up late. Caller, you're on the air. Wake stayed in front of the radio, listening. Hey, Pat, it's Maurice Horton. Hello, Maurice. What are you up to? Well, I was just taking my dog, Toby, on a walk. Isn't it beautiful out there tonight? Sure, but Pat, the reason I called is that Toby heard something rustling in the undergrowth and took off after it. I couldn't find him. Probably a rabbit. Okay, sure, Toby loves rabbits. Anyway, I figured that, if anyone runs into Toby, could they grab him? My number's on the collar. And Toby's a friendly dog? Oh, Toby loves people. Usually he comes back, but we were pretty far from home, and it sounds like he went pretty wild there. Well, Maurice, the word's out there now. Hope Toby comes home soon. You have a good night. Wake walked into the open garage. The place was half lit, illuminated only by the glow of a TV. A real mess, too. A puddle of oil gleamed on the concrete floor, and someone had knocked over a workbench, scattering tools and repair manuals. A car in one of the garage bays had a smashed windshield. Someone either trashed the place or there had been some kind of fight. Wake started to walk into the office, stopped in front of the TV. The picture kept flipping, but there was something about it that drew his attention. He smacked the side of the TV and the picture stabilized. On the screen, a man in a wood-paneled room hunched over a desk. The shot was from the rear. The collar of the man's coat was turned up. Wake rubbed his head. He slowly reached out and turned up the sound. Tap, tap, tap. The man was typing. The picture started flipping. Wake slapped the side again. "All right," the voiceover said as the man continued to type away. "I'll keep writing." Static from the TV, the voice cutting out and in. "Outside, only darkness. I can feel her presence. Smell her perfume. I'll fix it. Bring her back." The picture went snowy. Wake banged his hand against the TV. The image went black. "If I stop..." The audio faded. "She's lost." The TV went dead. Wake stared at the TV and knew there was nothing he could do, no amount of pounding on it that could bring the show back. He took a last look around the garage and stepped into the office. No sign of a struggle in there. Nothing out of place. A bright Nordic walking poster was tacked to the wall with the slogan, "Incontestably Proven Health Benefits." A framed newspaper article showed a picture of Stucky smiling in front of the gas station. He had been proclaimed Bright Falls Businessman of the Year for expanding his gas station to include cabin rentals and bringing in tourist trade. Wake remembered the last time he had seen Stucky, seen the taken he had become, writhing in the flashlight as Wake pumped bullets into him. The thought made him sick. Wake turned away from the picture. Through the window, he could see the sun just beginning to come up, the red glow edging over the horizon. Wake picked up a soda bottle on the counter. The bottle wasn't cold, but there was still fizz in it. Beside the bottle was another manuscript page. The page shook in his hand as Wake picked it up. He shoved it into his pocket. He couldn't bear to read it now. Time enough for that later. He sat down, more exhausted than he could remember ever being. He picked up the phone, the receiver almost too heavy to lift, and dialed 911. Rose knew that Rusty was in love with her, and she liked him too. She liked him a lot. He treated her well, made her smile, made her feel good. But Rusty wasn't the prince of her dreams, and that tended to underline the unbearable truth. She was no closer to that Hollywood magic than he was. Alright, so this is going to be interesting. Because normally I tend to lose frames per second on this particular screen on a day where I'm like just streaming. But today not only am I streaming, but I'm also recording this at the same time. So I'm expecting that my notes are probably going to typing out my notes are probably going to cause all sorts of issues for OBS. So we have, I believe, effectively reached the end. Yep, we've reached the end of episode 1. Now, the only thing that the book doesn't cover specifically is, and this may be something that they go over when the next chapter starts up. But one thing that it doesn't, like, explicitly cover is Sheriff Breaker arriving, asking him, hey, have you seen Stucky? He owns the gas station. And then them going to Cauldron Lake and finding that the cabin isn't there. That will likely be covered more specifically, but the next chapter does start with him talking to Dr. Nelson. I almost wanted to call him Dr. Howard, which I think I might be getting from Dr. Hayward from Twin Peaks. But who can say? Who can say for sure? So what do we got here? After spending a lot of chapters describing, like, essentially, like, how long was it from, like, when he wakes up in the car to just now? Let me see. Let me take a look here. So he woke up in the crashed car in Chapter 4. Chapter 4 and 5 describe everything getting to the logging station. And then in one chapter we get to the gas station finally. Which, I mean, makes sense in terms of, like, because, like, how to put this? In the game, the logging camp is kind of the halfway point of the forest section. It's basically, if you think about it, like divided up into like third. Well, I would say, okay, how to put this? Because you've got the prologue, the boat, the Oh Dear Diner, and then Bird Leg Cabin, right? And that's kind of like the first half of episode 1, and then you spend the rest of the episode going through the forest. I have messages on Discord. Hold on. What was I saying? Okay. So the book needs to kind of like cover Wake's initial reaction to waking up in the crashed car and then kind of like dealing with everything up to the point of the logging camp. By the time we've hit the logging camp, though, like, Wake's kind of not gotten a good handle on what's going on, but he's gotten some kind of handle on it. So, in the book, it takes us 2 chapters to get to the logging camp and then 1 to get to the gas station. And that's mostly because there really isn't anything hugely of note that happens between the logging camp and the gas station. Like, Stucky menaces you a couple times, but then, like, you fight him outside the gas station, and then you just kind of walk in. Wake, at this point, hasn't figured out that the dude on the TV is himself yet. Mostly because I think at this point in the... I gotta go close my door real quick, 1 second. Alright, neither of my cats better meow to get out of the room. Y'all had your chance. You're locked in here. You're trapped in here with me now. You understand that, Ragnarok? You've really been favoring that corner over there. You good? Anyway, so at this point, like in the game at this point, Wake has already like found a page describing how like he sees himself on the television, so like he's kind of prepared for it and acknowledges it a lot sooner, but like in this, like they're kind of saving him his realization of that. Stucky is super dead now. Like, he was dead before, because once you become a Taken, there's not really any coming back from that. But now, like, he's dead. Like, hella dead. Like, he is fucking evaporated. And, like, this is kind of one of the more subtle horrors of the Taken, you know? Like, okay. So one of the things that they bring up in the book is, and one of the things that you can notice in the game, is the signs all over the gas station, right? And at that point, you've been dealing with Stucky for a good chunk of the level. And he's been shouting all sorts of shit at you. all sorts of stuff about non-refundable reservation deposits, Nordic walking, and its incontestably proven health benefits. And, you know, of course, uh, uh, other stuff as well. Spark plugs, changing oil. You know how it is. So one of the things that they go over with like a lot later in the story is why the Taken speak the way they do. Why they're just kind of like throwing out these random phrases. And it's kind of like when a dead body has like spasms because there's still electrical signals like going through the nerves. Like the phrases are all just sort of like things from their previous life, you know? So Wake bringing up like all of these signs he's seeing isn't just like building the scene. It's he's noticing these things because Stucky was shouting them at him as he was swinging a fucking axe at him. So I lost my train of thought for a moment there. So the thing with like one of the subtle horrors of the Taken is like you at certain points in Alan Wake, you hear about like people going missing. You find like missing persons posters in the police station. I think in episode 2, Rusty mentions... Did I pause the video? I did not. 1 second. In episode 2, Rusty mentions, like, hey, we've had some campers that have gone missing, when he's talking about, like, how there have been poachers laying bear traps in the woods. And the truth of the matter is, none of those people, their bodies are never going to be found. Because it's not just so much that, like, the Dark Presence has effectively hollowed them out and filled them up with darkness goo. Not the darkness goo that you find on the ground. That's just free will that they needed to get rid of. I'll go over that in a bit. But... And then, of course, when Wake kills a Taken, it just dissolves. Now, this in particular is very scary to me. See, I don't have a lot of big phobias. Death, the idea that I wouldn't be able to trust my own senses, that sort of thing. But one of the things that always manages to unnerve me is when a character is not just killed, but is, like, physically undone. Like, okay. Let me set the stage for you here. Captain America, the First Avenger, right? Effectively, a superhero movie combined with a World War II movie, right? World War II, what did people have? People had guns in World War II. You know what we probably can't show in a PG-13 movie? The effect of guns, and especially big guns, on the human body. Well, gee whiz, what are we gonna do about that? What if we just made guns that disintegrated people? It's bloodless carnage. It'll be fine. That way we don't have to show dudes getting ripped apart by high caliber bullets. Do you know what fucking terrifies me more than anything? Is when people get dusted. I hate that. I'm sitting there watching the scene, this triumphant scene where Captain America is leading the charge on a Hydra base, and dudes are getting reduced to ash left and right. And I am uncomfortable. And the movie doesn't seem to get why that's horrifying to me. But you know what movie did understand how horrifying that is? Fucking Steven Spielberg's War of the Worlds. Let me tell you. That movie understands like the concept of people being reduced to dust is kind of inherently terrifying. And uses it to excellent effect. Alright, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next chapter. I can't keep telling you people about all of my worst fears. I'm putting myself at too big of a disadvantage. Somebody's gonna know exactly how to, like, undo my psyche with the single pull of a thread. And I don't know if I can handle that. Emotionally speaking. Chapter 7. You took quite a blow to the head, Mr. Wake, said Dr. Nelson, his fingers lightly bandaging Wake's forehead. Deputy Thornton found your car a couple hours ago, or a couple hours ago. Excuse me. A couple hours ago at the bottom of a ravine. You're lucky to be alive. Yeah, I really feel lucky, Doc, said Wake, blinking in the golden sunlight pouring through the windows of the conference room in the sheriff's station. He called in from trout fishing and still in his fishing vest, lures poking through the brim of his hat. The old country doc had been examining Wake for the last 20 minutes, taking his temperature, checking his reflexes, his pupils, his balance. Are you sure you haven't had any hallucinations or double vision? Said the doctor, snipping off loose threads of the bandage. Wake remembered the taken dissolving in the beam from his flashlight like exploding dandelions. No. I heard you were going on about an island in Cauldron Lake. I said no. I'd still like you to go to Templeton Hospital to get an MRI, said the doctor, putting away his instruments. It's only an hour drive, and I'm fine, said Wake. I'm lucky, remember? You're a lousy patient, Mr. Wake. Dr. Squeeze's shoulders stood up. I'm the same way. He snapped his bag shut, started for the door. I'll tell Sarah that you're ready to talk. Sarah? Sheriff Breaker, said the doctor. We're pretty informal around here. Wake watched the door Wake watched the doctor close the door behind him. The conference room was a plain, thinly carpeted room with a long rectangular table and a dozen mismatched chairs arranged around it. An American flag stood in one corner, while an elk head stared blankly at Wake from the far wall. The only other decorations in the room were a bulletin board with pictures of prize-winning pigs and calves from the local grange, and posters warning of the dangers of forest fires. Wake closed his eyes in the warm light. He was tired. He was beyond tired. It's dark, Alan, said Alice, clinging to him. I'll check the fuse box, said Wake. All the remodeling they're doing in the building, the electrical system keeps overloading. I'm scared, said Alice. He tried to leave, but she held him tight, and he didn't push it. She felt too good. It was almost midnight. They were in their New York City apartment, standing in her studio. She had been working on some photographs for the jacket of his next book. Good shots, too. The hard part was deciding which one fit the mood of the book. Then the lights had gone out, and she grabbed onto him, her face hidden in shadow, only her wide eyes visible. Alice was terrified of the dark. It's so dark here, Alan. I know. Let me go and I'll take care of it. You must think I'm crazy. You know better than that. I used to have nightmares when I was a kid. Dark really spooked me, too. When it got so bad I was afraid to sleep, my mom gave me this old light switch. She called it the clicker. The clicker, huh? Wake heard her chuckle. If I ever got scared of the dark, I could just flip the switch and a magic light would scare the monsters away. I didn't start the video. Whoops. What I wouldn't give for something like that. It's somewhere in my office. You can have it. Maybe it'll help you too. Too late, Alice whispered. Never too late, said Wake. Let me go and I'll turn on the lights. Don't leave me, said Alice. Come with me. He took her hand. I can't, said Alice. He squeezed her cool hand, tried to warm her. Why not? It's too dark. I can't see a thing. I'm here with you. No, sobbed Alice. No, you're not, Alan. Mr. Wake? Wake opened his eyes, saw Sheriff Sarah Breaker standing over him. She was a pretty woman in her early 30s, wholesome in that small-town way, her uniform crisp, the sheriff's badge gleaming, intelligent eyes. She'd need to be smart to make sheriff in a town full of outdoorsmen who probably thought women belonged in the kitchen. She looked concerned. Doc said you shouldn't go to sleep for at least 8 hours, Mr. Wake, said Breaker, sitting in a chair facing him, in case there's a hemorrhage or swelling of the brain. I wasn't sleeping, said Wake. I was dreaming. The sheriff smiled, a nice, open smile, probably useful in diffusing trouble, calming an angry drunk. If you say so. Wake rubbed his eyes, stretched. Are you going to help me find Alice? I've already started making inquiries, said the sheriff. Rose at the diner is talking to everyone who walks in the door, and Pat Maines put out an announcement on the radio. Everybody in Bright Falls listens to Pat. We were on the island in the lake, said Wake. Bird Lake Cabin. I just left her for a minute. The sheriff held up a hand. There is no island in Cauldron Lake. We've been over that several times. We were there, Sheriff. The only island in that lake... Lake? The only island in that lake... The only island in the lake sank during an earthquake in 1973, said the sheriff. Don't you remember me telling you that? Doc said you might experience hallucinations. It wasn't a hallucination, said Wake. I was at Bird Leg Cabin with Alice. The sheriff shook her head. No, Mr. Wake, you've been someplace for the last week, but you weren't at Bird Leg Cabin. She looked concerned again. You were in a car accident, Mr. Wake. You hit your head. You've refused further medical attention, which is your right. I just want to find Alice. That's what we all want, Mr. Wake. The sheriff handed him his cell phone. Looks like we have the same phone, so I charged this up for you. I pulled up your wife's number, but it's out of service. Wake gripped the cell phone. She's afraid of the dark. You told me that. Wake was glad he hadn't told her about the Taken, hadn't mentioned the men who couldn't be killed with bullets alone, men who dissolved in the light. When she had driven up to Stucky's gas station at sunrise, she had been solicitous, done minor first aid on his head wound, put antibiotic cream on the scratches on his hands. He wanted to reveal what had happened, but as desperate as he was, he knew better than to tell her the whole truth, not after seeing her face when he had talked about Bird Lake Cabin. We'll find her, Mr. Wake. There was no body in your wrecked car, so she must have survived too. She wasn't with me in the car. Haven't you been listening? The sheriff nodded. I understand. Still, you're rather unclear about the details of last night. The doc said temporary memory loss and confusion are sometimes in injuries like yours. Fucking shit, goddamn. Temporary memory loss and confusion are common in injuries like yours. Her voice was calm and reassuring. Steady. Sheriff Breaker was used to dangerous situations, natural disasters, mudslides and snowstorms, hair-trigger loggers beating each other senseless. She handled things. Wake liked her. More than that, he trusted her with everything but the truth. Your wife might have been equally disoriented after the crash, said the sheriff. I've got my deputies and teams of volunteers searching the woods right now. She leaned back in her chair. You didn't see Carl Stucky at the gas station last night, did you? Wake hesitated. No, I didn't. The sheriff stared at him. I called him this morning, wanted to ask him to be on the lookout for your wife, but he wasn't at the station. It's not like him. The garage is pretty trashed, too. That's not like him either. The cell phone in his hand vibrated and Wake jumped. Excuse me. Quit talking to that damned lady cop or you're going to be a famous writer with a dead wife, said a voice on the phone. Are you all right, Mr. Wake? Said the sheriff. Fine, just a business call, said Wake, backing toward the door. He walked out into the hallway, moved someplace quiet, and pressed the phone against his ear. Who are you? Alan, said Alice. Alan! Alice? Her voice sounded distant, disembodied, and Wake imagined her drifting down into the cold darkness of Cauldron Lake. Alice, where... That's enough of that shit, said the man on the line. I want to talk to my wife again, ordered Wake. We all got things we want, pal. Me, I want a thick steak, a new car, and for you to keep your mouth shut. Look, I'll pay you anything. Meet me at midnight tonight at Elderwood Park, a place called Lover's Peak. Kinda sweet, isn't it? And pal? Yes? No cops. Your wife wouldn't look nearly so beautiful with a bullet in her head. Wake didn't know how long he stood there listening to dead air before he broke the connection. He checked the number, but it was blocked. He thought about going to the sheriff, but couldn't risk it. She was clearly competent in dealing with local problems, but this was different. Even the feds didn't usually get the victim back alive. No, the secret was to play the game. No tricks, no high-tech tracking, just meet the man and do whatever he wanted. Pay whatever he asked, as long as Wake got Alice back. Near the front desk, Wake spotted an elderly lady he had seen carrying a lantern in the diner that first day. She had the same lantern with her now, light blazing. She flicked the light switch in the hallway off and on, off and on. It's working, the lantern lady called the female deputy behind the desk. Can't be too sure. She started for the front door. Thanks, Mrs. Weaver, said the deputy, a brassy redhead with thick glasses and eyebrows plucked so thin they were practically invisible. She glanced over at him. Mr. Wake, I'm Deputy Grant. I've got your suitcases. Wake started toward the deputy when the front door to the station burst open, and a male deputy dragged a handcuffed man inside. Hey, I need more light in here, bellowed the handcuffed man, his speech slurred. God damn it, more lights! I don't like the goddamn shadows in here. What's wrong with Snyder this time, Mulligan? Said Deputy Grant. I thought he quit drinking for good. Well, no such luck, said Deputy Mulligan, trying to hold the handcuffed man upright. Snyder here went on a bender and beat Danny pretty badly. He started shouting like a wild man the moment he woke up. Hey, shouted Snyder, staring at Wake. You going to help me? It's too damn dark in here. Give me some light. Come on, Snyder, said Deputy Mulligan, pulling him through the door marked cells. Try to cooperate for once. Do something, mister, Snyder screamed at Wake. I need more light. The door to the cells slammed behind Snyder and the deputy. Don't mind Snyder, Mr. Wake, said Deputy Grant, handing him a suitcase. Handing him the suitcase, blah, blah, blah. He's always been a mean drunk. A man in matching beige slacks and an open-necked shirt strode up to the desk. The neatly buttoned white cardigan he wore was probably meant to suggest a relaxed, friendly attitude, but his stiff manner and pinched expression was all wrong for it. He looked familiar, and the fact that Wake couldn't place him was faintly unsettling. Maybe the doctor was right about the effects of a head wound. I'm afraid I'm here to pick up the Anderson brothers again, the man said. I can assure you, Deputy, my staff has been reprimanded for letting them wander off. Any recommendation for a place to stay? Wake asked the deputy. The cabins at Elderwood National Park are pretty nice, Mr. Wake, said the deputy, looking relieved to be able to ignore the man. You can make arrangements with Rusty at the visitor center. Wake? Alan Wake? The man narrowed his eyes and thrust out a hand. I'm Dr. Emil Hartman. It's a pleasure to meet you. Wake stood motionless. Hartman pulled his hand back. I understand completely. Human touch can be upsetting to many creative people. His eyes were dark and cool and utterly unreadable. Mr. Wake, I'd like to invite you to stay at Cauldron Lake Lodge as my guest. You're the one my wife talked to, said Wake, remembering Hartman's face from the book he had found among Alice's things. The shrink. Hartman's thin smile could cleave a diamond. You're the reason we came here, said Wake, face flushing. The man idly ran a thumb along the collar of his shirt, assuming Wake was paying him a compliment. Yes, I've had the pleasure of discussing your problem with your lovely wife on the phone several times. I've read 2 of your books in preparation, and I think together we can overcome your... Wake punched him, knocked Hartman backwards against the counter. Sheriff Breaker was walking out of her office as Wake hit Hartman. She grabbed Wake's right arm as he went to hit him again. Enough. Hartman straightened up, smoothed his trousers. Quite all right, Sheriff. I'm as used to volatile personalities as you are. Occupational hazard. He pursed his lips. I think your problems extend far beyond writer's block, Mr. fucking... Whiter's Block, Mr. Rake. Fabian Whiter's Block, Mr. Oh, God. All right. I can help you, but not without your trust or willingness to acknowledge your... You can't help me with anything, Wake said quietly as the sheriff continued to keep a grip on him. Ow! Wake turned at the commotion from the front door. Hey, get your hands off my client, said Barry Wheeler, Wake's New York literary agent. Bustled in, a short, stocky man looking faintly ridiculous in new hiking boots and a bright red parka. He wagged a finger at the sheriff. You're asking for a lawsuit, lady. What are you doing here, Barry? Said Wake. The sheriff laughed. You know this red butterball here, Mr. Wake? I'm Barry Wheeler, Barry said to the sheriff. I represent Mr. Wake. Hartman rubbed his jaw. No harm done, Sarah. I won't be pressing charges. Clearly, Mr. Wake has a lot on his mind. He smiled again at Wake. My offer of accommodations at the lodge still stands. Do you have a car, Barry? Said Wake. I didn't hitchhike, said Barry, and I don't have subways out here. Take care of yourself, Mr. Wake, said the sheriff. We still have a lot of things to clear up. When you're more rested, of course. Of course, said Wake. Sheriff, called the deputy, listening to someone on her headset. We just got a call from the foreman at the number 4 logging camp. Vandals hit the site again last night. This time they pushed a trailer into the ravine with a bulldozer. Wake picked up his suitcases. Let's get out of here, Barry. Some of the Taken retained echoes of their former selves, but these were just the nerve twitches of dead things. They were puppets filled with darkness and nothing else. In most cases, the Taken were enough for the purpose of the Dark Presence, but for anything more elaborate, as with the writer, more was required. It needed his mind, and so, rather than taking the writer over completely, it merely touched him. Oh yeah, see, that was the thing that I was talking about, remember? You remember the thing I was talking about? There it is, in the book, black and white, ink on paper, let's go. Okay. So we got a couple things that happened in this chapter. Like I said, we basically dovetail immediately into the beginning of episode 2. We meet a few characters in this chapter. First off, we meet Dr. Nelson. For Dr. Nelson, like I said, I kind of made the mistake of almost calling him Dr. Howard because I was thinking about Dr. Hayward from... Oh, excuse me. From Twin Peaks. And it's kind of the same thing in terms of, like, character archetype. He's a small-town doctor. He probably knows everyone in town. He's often out doing various outdoorsy things. I've got hiccups now. That's great. Hold on. I'm the kind of person who, like, when they have hiccups, I take a deep breath, hold it for 10 seconds, and then let it out slowly. It tends to work, honestly. But yeah, he's kind of just sort of like the first person that, like, they call if, like, they need, like, you know, first aid, like, especially, like, at the police station, stuff like that. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. So this particular chapter changes up a few things. Dr. Nelson is actually the one who has the discussion about Snyder with Deputy Grant. And at that point, Snyder is already locked in the cells. We met... Oh god, what's her name? The lamp lady. We met her in an earlier chapter going on about, like, the darkness, but that now we get sort of, like, the additional context, like, she's doing this all over town. right? So we know about her. We met Sheriff Sarah Breaker. Sheriff Breaker is the cop. She is, you know, ethical, trustworthy, um, a good person. So you know she's a fictional cop. um, and there's a little bit more to both Sarah and kind of like the Breaker family that we'll probably end up discussing a little bit later once it becomes a bit more relevant. But right now, she was the one who met with Alan when he called 911 while at Stucky's gas station. Um, and she genuinely wants to help him, but you know, she's not aware of like the weird shit that he's dealing with, so she can only like help so much when he starts talking about, like, for example, a cabin that was on an island that sunk into the lake like 40 years ago. Which, by the way, um, I think, if I remember right, no, it didn't sink. I was thinking, they mentioned it sinking in an earthquake, and I thought to myself, like, didn't it sink in an eruption because it's like a volcano? But now that I'm thinking about it, no, because the lake is a caldera. It's already a dormant volcano. So, it probably, I don't think it was another eruption, but I can't recall right off the top of my head. Oop, hold on. Here we go. Who else we meet? We met a couple of deputies. We met Deputy Grant. Deputy Grant is essentially the receptionist, at the very least, at the point that we meet her within the story of Alan Wake. Um, she has glasses in the book, which is not something that is usually part of her character design, at least not in the game. She does not have glasses in the game. Snyder, he's a drunk guy, but he's also one of the first indications that the Taken aren't just a threat to Alan himself, but also, like, obviously Stucky killed that one guy, but like in episode 2 when he's talking to Mott at like the halfway point of the Elderwood section, um one of the first things that he says to Mott is, "You see them too." Because Alan is at least partially convinced that he might be hallucinating all of this. Uh, Snyder is one of like the earliest indications that just like, no, this is all actually happening. Because even though he is a drunk motherfucker, he is still talking about seeing the same things that Alan is seeing. Uh, Now, one of the most interesting things here is that we also meet Deputy Thornton. Or not Thornton. Thornton gets mentioned, but we meet Deputy Mulligan. Hold on, I keep hitting like all the wrong fucking buttons here. There's a trope in fiction called, I want to say it's just called Those Two Guys. Occasionally in um, fictional works, they will have like a pair of characters that are really sort of there for like usually comedic purposes. Um, one of the most prominent examples of this are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern from Hamlet. They're just kind of like those two guys. Um, in hold on, let me. In Alan Wake, those two guys are deputies Mulligan and Thornton. You occasionally hear them on the police radio talking with another deputy whose name I don't recall off the top of my head. Um, Thinking to myself, give me a moment. Uh, but you never really see them in the game. That being said, Deputy Mulligan does show up in the short live action series Bright Falls. Hold on. I tried to replay the fucking video and can we just... Okay, got it on loop. He it's really his only sort of like visual appearance. Thornton doesn't show up, but he shows up after the main character of Bright Falls has trashed his hotel room after losing time over the night and just going absolutely fucking nuts. He shows up and he's just like, "Hey, what happened in your hotel room, buddy?" It's just like, I left the door in and an animal got in. And Deputy Mulligan takes a look at this, takes a look at the guy, just like, yeah, man. 12-point stag did this. It's just like, okay, buddy. And then he spits chewing tobacco into a mug and hands it to the guy. It's just like, cool. Thanks, Mulligan. You're a fucking peach. I really ought to watch Bright Falls again. That was a good, like, mini-series. I've said it before, if you're at all interested in, like... If you've played Alan Wake and you're kind of, like, hankering for more before Alan Wake 2 comes out, I would highly recommend checking out the Bright Falls series. It's very short, but, like, it's also super cool. My personal interpretation of it has always been it is the story of a guy who is in the process of being assimilated by the Dark Presence to turn into a Taken, just based on what happens in it. Who else do we meet? We meet Dr. Emil Hartman. Emil Hartman is kind of a douche. He's kind of a smug prick. And they don't really ever sort of like imply that people in town, like in the game, they don't ever really imply that like people in town don't really like him. Like the closest that it gets is that when he's having the conversation about picking up the Anderson brothers, Deputy Grant is just like, you know, they never caused any trouble when they were living at the farm. Because they have a farm in Bright Falls. And he just like brushes off, just like, yes, well, we can only slow the progression of their dementia. And and I like in the book that is just like he starts talking to Deputy Grant, and then Alan immediately like interrupts the conversation before she has to reply, and she's like visibly relieved. It's just like, oh, thank God you started talking to me. I cannot stand this guy. And then, of course, we get Alan socking him, which is fantastic. I love it. And finally, we have... Hold on. I need to... Can you, like... Okay. Barry Wheeler, aka the best character in the game. Genuinely, I fucking love Barry. He's such a fun character, brings like a lot of levity to the story while not sort of like undercutting it, like undercutting like the danger of it, you know? Barry is of course Alan's agent. And is in charge of, among other things, mostly making sure that Alan doesn't get himself into serious legal trouble. Because Alan, as we know, Mr. Born Pissed Off tattoo. Can you imagine if you got that as a tramp stamp? A Born Pissed Off tramp stamp. That would be great. I love that. Somebody mod the game. Anyway, what am I fucking saying? Barry, so in the game, Alan has advance notice of Barry arriving because Barry calls him and he tells Barry that he is at the sheriff's station. Here, Barry just fucking shows up. He's just like, hey man, I'm here to make sure that you don't punch anybody who will sue you. And thank goodness, Emil Hartman doesn't want to press charges. Though admittedly, only because he has ulterior motives. But yeah, I like Barry. Barry really shines like much later on in the narrative once things have started ramping up and he's become a little bit more used to the weird shit going on. So we'll obviously get to some good stuff for Barry as we go further into the story. For now, let's go ahead and continue to the next chapter. Oh, sorry. My mouse has been, like, double-clicking recently for some reason. Chapter 8. Wake tossed the suitcases into the backseat of Barry's rental car, a big orange SUV with maps and fast food wrappers strewn around the floor. "What the hell was that all about with you and the guy in the Mr. Rogers cardigan, Al?" said Barry as they got in. "We don't need a replay of your bout with the paparazzi. I thought Lady Law was gonna lock you—" "Alice has been kidnapped," said Wake. "You're shitting me," said Barry, his fingers frozen on the ignition key. "Drive," said Wake. "What are the police doing about it?" "I haven't told them," said Wake. "Now drive." Barry drove. He kept glancing over at Wake, trying to start a conversation, but Wake remained silent. When they were out of the city limits, cruising along the two-lane road through the forest, Barry couldn't contain himself any longer. "Aren't you at least going to tell me why you got a bandage on your head? You get a lobotomy or something?" "Barry, lobotomies don't go through the temple. They go up through the eye. They don't want to, like, break the fucking skull bones. Come on, man." "It's a long story. I've been running around Hicksville looking for you for 2 days now," said Barry. "I've got time." "I was in a car crash," said Wake. "You got checked out by a doctor?" said Barry. "A real doctor, not some local quack?" "Stay on this road until we get to a gas station," said Wake. "Stucky's gas station. When you see it, pull in." "I don't need gas," said Barry. "I hid a revolver and ammunition there early this morning," said Wake. Barry glanced over at him, then back at the road. "Okay." He shifted in his seat, the down parka rustling. "Some people would say, 'Thanks for checking up on me, Barry. Thanks for flying out from New York because you haven't been able to reach me for a week and you were worried about your friend.' Not you, though. Not my pal Al. You just want to stop off and pick up a handgun. Nice. Very nice." "Thanks for coming, Barry." You mean it?" "I mean it." Barry hummed happily to himself, his round cheeks pink as a baby. A hard-driving, deal-making, lawyer-sicking baby. "You know, Al, it's not a very good idea to shoot the kidnapper. Not until you get Alice back. There's the whole legal issue. I'm not going to shoot the kidnapper. I'm going to pay him whatever he wants." "Then what do you need a gun for?" said Barry. Guns make me nervous. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Great, said Barry, checking the rearview mirror. That kind of answer does wonders for my ulcer. You listen real hard, you can hear my bile ducts squirt. Really, just take a moment. He glanced around at the evergreens that came almost to the edge of the road. Think there's enough trees here, Al? Enough pollen in the air? Got more allergies than the Bubble Boy. Stucky's gas station's about another mile, said Wake. Thanks for the empathy, Barry sneezed. You're all heart. Wake stayed silent. You know who kidnapped Alice? Said Barry. No. Wake rolled the window down, let the cool wind blow over his face. How much did the kidnapper want for her? You want me to dick her, see if I can get a deal? Said Wake. Hey, said Barry, voice cracking. I'm not the enemy here, Al. You're right, said Wake. Sorry. Stucky's gas station was still closed. He pointed. Pull in behind the building. Barry did as he was told. Wake hopped out, sidled over to a trash can overflowing with oil cans. He looked around, reached into the can, and pulled out a large paper bag, then back into the car. Barry drove off, leaving rubber on the pavement. I feel like we're in a spy movie, said Barry, sweat beading on his upper lip. I'm sure the parka helps, said Wake. Not that you don't look very chic and down, fucking shit, goddamn, okay. Not that you don't look very chic and down. Mount Everest chic. I didn't appreciate that red butterball crack the sheriff made, by the way. Take the next turnoff. Lake Drive, said Wake. I thought we were going to Elderwood. First, I'm going to prove to you that I'm not crazy, said Wake. Barry glanced over at him, but didn't answer. Wake told Barry everything on the drive to the lake, told him about Bird Lake Cabin, the fight with Alice, and her disappearance. He told Barry about the Taken and how they disappeared without a trace when he killed them. Wake even told him about the manuscript pages he had found, pulled them out of his jacket, and showed them to him. He had to tell somebody, and while Barry could be an asshole, Wake trusted him. Barry hadn't said a word the whole time. Wake talked, just kept his eyes on the winding road, wiping his nose once in a while. Wake and Barry stood on an outcropping of rock bordering Cauldron Lake. It was there, said Wake, pointing at the water. Bird Lake Cabin. Alice and I, we stayed there. I believe you, Al. Wake jumped down onto the sand, started walking back and forth, head down. Al, come on, there's no need for this. Wake bent over, got onto his knees, and started scooping sand away. Something caught his attention. He looked over the edge and scrambled down a short, overgrown path to the remnants of the old bridge. See? This was part of the bridge that led from the shore to the cabin. Barry followed him down and kicked at one of the worm-eaten posts. Al, this thing hasn't been a bridge for years. It was here, Barry. This is the last place I saw Alice. Barry patted him on the back. We're gonna find her, Al. He stepped back. Let's check out that cabin at the park and the both of us get some rest, okay? Al? Okay? My, neck is sore? Wake nodded and trudged back to the car. He was utterly exhausted, drained of hope, filled with doubt. No wonder the sheriff had refused his demands this morning to take him to the site. She had known there was nothing there. He stopped himself from that line of thought. No. Wake wasn't crazy. He had been to Bird Lake Cabin. He had held Alice in his arms there. Had fired up the generator to turn on the lights. He had seen a lover's heart carved into the stump of a tree. He had been there. They had been there. Because if Wake was wrong about that, he was wrong about everything. Tonight he would meet with the kidnapper. One way or the other, he'd get Alice back. Wake closed his eyes as Barry drove, and when he opened them again, he saw a bullet hole road sign up ahead. Elderwood Visitor Center, 5 miles. Turn off here. Barry sneezed and made the turn. He glanced over at Wake. Don't get mad at me, but I think we should fly to Seattle and have you seen by a neurologist. I don't need to see a neurologist. You've been in a car wreck, Al. We should make sure you're okay. I'm not okay, said Wake, but I know what I saw. Look at me, Barry. Look at me. He waited for Barry to turn his head. What I told you was the truth, every word of it. Do you believe me? No, Barry shrugged. Doesn't matter, though. Riders, you're all nuts. He blew his nose, driving with one hand on the wheel. But I believe that you believe it, Al, and that's all that matters to me. Anything you want, anything you need, I'm here for you. Thanks. You want my advice, though? My professional opinion? Said Barry. I wouldn't tell anybody about these Taken. You wouldn't want to upset them. And you wouldn't want them to commit me. Hard to type in a straitjacket, said Barry. He must have seen Wake's distraught expression. Alice is going to be fine. She's smart, you're tough, and I can talk anybody into anything. We'll get her back, don't worry. Barry smiled as he pulled into the visitor center parking lot. Then we can discuss your next book. Those manuscript pages are a good start. I smell bestseller. They got out of the car and headed up the stone steps of the visitor center, a huge log structure with soaring ceilings and panoramic windows. Rose, the waitress from the diner, was coming out of the double doors as they approached, wearing her red uniform, her hair up. Mr. Wake! Oh, this is so cool, gushed Rose. Barry, you found him! Wake looked at Barry. You know her? Like I said, I've been asking all over town for you ever since I arrived, said Barry. How you doing, beautiful? Better now, Rose said to Barry, blushing. I'm so glad you're okay, Mr. Wake. I'm fine, said Wake. If you happen to see my wife... I'll call the sheriff, said Rose. I heard she was missing on the radio this morning. That is so creepy, but I'm sure she'll turn up. All kinds of weird things happen in Bright Falls. It's like we're in some kind of Night Springs vortex or something. What are you talking about, said Wake. Just stuff, said Rose, eyes downcast. Last night, Rusty's dog Max got all torn up and... She looked flustered. I gotta go, or I'm going to be late for work. I only came here to bring Rusty his coffee. You know how he is about our Oh Dear Diner special brew. She gave Wake a quick kiss on the cheek. Bye, Mr. Wake. Bye, Barry. Barry watched her leave. Watched her butt, anyway. How come the writer is always the one getting kissed and the agent is always getting just a hello and goodbye? Wake pushed through the doors into the visitor center and stopped in the foyer. Foyer? 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 That place. Looking around, the shelves nearby were lined with maps, souvenirs, postcards, and tourist items like miniature snowshoes and jars of mountain honey. The knotty pine walls displayed wildlife posters and maps of Bright Falls, Deerfest, and Cauldron Lake. The most impressive sight was a huge skeleton of a woolly mammoth standing in the main room. Wake walked over and stood in front of it, read the sign. Buck-toothed Charlie, Columbian Mammoth. Mammuthus columbi, Washington State official state fossil. That's one ugly beast, said Barry, looking up at the massive skull, the enormous curved tusks. Through the panoramic windows, Wake saw Rusty on the back deck, the ranger bandaging the leg of a dog that rested on top of a wooden picnic table. I'll be right back, Barry. I'm going to check us into a cabin. You think this thing's for sale? Barry said, pointing at the skeleton of the mammoth. Dumbo there would look great in my office. Yeah, that'll bring in the clients, said Wake, going out onto the deck. Rusty looked up as Wake approached. So did the big dog on the table, some shaggy mixed breed with a long snout. Rusty had his sleeves rolled up, his hat on the bench beside him. A thermos rested beside the hat, probably filled with Rose's coffee. Howdy, Mr. Wake, he said, going back to the dog, his movements delicate as he continued bandaging the animal's leg. Glad to see you. Folks have been looking for you. Chubby little fella in a red parka. I already checked in with the sheriff, but thanks, said Wake. I'm interested in renting a cabin. What happened to your head? Said Rusty as he finished taping up the dog's leg. Cut myself shaving. Is that a joke? Said Rusty. Yes. Rusty grinned. New York humor, huh? I get it. Sure, I can rent you a cabin. Got only one left. It's kinda out there, though. No problem. Wake petted the dog's head. What happened to Max? Ran into something in the woods last night, said Rusty, shaking his head. He put the gauze and antibiotic cream back into the first aid kit. Ripped him up pretty good, too. Does that happen to him very often? Said Wake, rubbing the dog's chin. He got a snout full of porcupine quills once, but nothing like this before, said Rusty. Max is usually pretty careful. Any idea what it was? Said Wake. Rusty shook his head. Wish I did. I'm not even sure it was an animal. What do you mean? Nothing. I don't mean nothing. What else could it be? Rusty looked up at him. You got a real nice way with animals, Mr. Wake. Even with a mutt like Max. A lot of you silly slickers. Or maybe it would have been like silly stickers. A lot of you city slickers, no offense, don't take to anything other than fancy little purebreds that ladies can carry around in their purses. Designer dogs for designer pocketbooks. I was going to hike up to Lover's Peak, Wake said Wake, gently rubbing the dog's ears, the animal's eyes rolling with pleasure. Can you give me directions? No problem, said Rusty. I can give you a map, too. If you're worried about running into what got a piece of Max, you can put your mind at ease. We got plenty of bears, but they stay away from humans. Just make plenty of noise when you walk, and they'll head in the opposite direction. He gently helped the dog's head down from the table. He gently helped the dog down from the table. Wake watched as Max limped away to the corner of the deck, found a bright spot in the sun, sat in the very center of it, the very brightest part. I turned the corner, afraid of what the flashlight's beam might reveal. A roughly painted symbol of a torch glowed in the light. Behind it, hidden by a rock, sat a battered metal trunk. It was here for a reason, packed with supplies, batteries, flares, ammo, things you need to make it through the darkness of the night. Something left behind by a fellow traveler, someone who knew what I knew, and more. Okay. So we continue with the book, switching some things up from the games. So, in episode 2 of Alan Wake, in the game, we go straight from the sheriff station to the visitor center. We get a cutscene about Alan, describing Alan discussing what was going on with Barry in the car, but we don't really get any sort of like indication as to exactly what's discussed. It's basically just like, oh yeah, I told Barry everything that happened, and he thinks I'm nuts, but I told him that I wrote a manuscript and he was seeing dollar signs. In this, we get something a little bit more substantial. See, in the game... oh, hold on. Dinner's here. Thank you. Salisbury steak. Nice. Okay, so, what was I saying? So, in the game, we have long... When we get to the visitor center, there's long... what's the word I'm looking for? Optional... expository scenes. Where Wake and Barry just kind of talk to each other. Right? Oh, that's good. Hold on. Oh, that's delicious. Ooh. Okay. Basically, the way that you get these, and the way that you get a lot of expository conversations in Alan Wake is by just kind of standing around in the same room as characters. Generally, the game will be like, okay, you have pretty much everything you need to progress, so you can go right now if you want, but if you stick around for a few seconds, usually, the conversation will continue, and the characters will discuss kind of what's going on in a bit more detail. It's one of those, like, one of the things that Alan Wake was kind of praised for when it came out was the way that it sort of integrated storytelling and gameplay. Right? I would argue a lot of games try to do a similar thing now. Mostly to less success. But Alan Wake, let me tell you, fucking nails it. Now the book, not wanting to describe Alan and Barry standing around in the visitor's center while Rusty is on the back porch taping up Max's leg. Moves that exposition instead to the car ride. Which, personally, I think is a really good choice. Just based on, like... Yeah, in the game, the exposition that you get between Alan and Barry in the visitor center is a reward for patience. It's a reward for being interested in what's going on in the story. And as a result, you get to hear more about what's going on. And sometimes these conversations can reveal extra gameplay elements, which we'll get to in a bit when we talk about the conversation with Rusty. But the book isn't going... The book sees an opportunity where it's just like, okay, so there's a period of time to be accounted for here between going from the sheriff's station to the cabins at Elderwood. What if we moved all of this conversation where Barry is expressing his disbelief and his skepticism and pointing out that he's concerned about Al's well-being to the car ride? Like I said, a good choice. The book also moves the scene of Alan going back to Cauldron Lake to this car ride. Because you see, obviously in the game, this is the final cutscene of episode 1. Wake goes to Cauldron Lake with Sarah and finds it empty. In the book, it's basically just like Sarah didn't bother taking him because she already knew Cauldron Lake was empty, so she knew they wouldn't find anything there. Let me try these mashed potatoes. Hold on. Oh, that's really good. Those are really good mashed potatoes. Delicious. So overall, these are definitely changes made for the sake of the medium that the story is being told in. This is a very common thing when people talk about adaptations of stuff. This is something that came up a lot when they announced the adaptation of, like, Nier Automata into an anime series. Some stories work really well as a video game, but you can potentially see there being issues if it was adapted into anything else, like a TV show, or a movie, or a cartoon, or anything like that. Or a book, in this case. As I mentioned, the sort of like reward of further exposition for players being patient in certain scenes works really well in a video game, where you have control over how quickly the narrative moves. Most of the time, generally speaking. In a book, not so much. So finding ways to kind of like move things around so that you get the same information told while still... excuse me. While still managing to kind of keep the pace going, keep the story moving, is, you know, very much a welcome thing. Now, conversation with Rusty. So in the game, it's established that Max gets got by a bear trap. This is intended as essentially kind of your tutorial / warning, where it's just like, hey, you're gonna be dealing with bear traps in this next level, so kind of keep an eye out here. It's also, on some level, there are early versions of the game where they fucked with the idea of having like taken animals. Mm, delicious. So, there's prominent indications of like, there's the guy's dog Toby going missing. Toby's dead, by the way. You find a page in, I think, the hard mode, the nightmare mode of the game, that describes him getting fucking murdered. Um, but there's that dog going missing. There is the discussion of bear traps and signs warning about bears in Elderwood National Forest. But in the end, they basically reduced it just down to like the flocks of ravens that attack you. But still, bear traps were kept around as a hazard to maneuver around. I make a gross noise real quick. 1 second. Okay. But because this isn't a video game, and thus we don't necessarily need to be warned to maneuver around bear traps. Oh, console will turn off automatically in 5 minutes. Sorry, I've got my Xbox on. Give me a second. In the book, it's implied that Max has gotten attacked him is what is implied. But this is this is kind of what I was talking about before, where it's just like this is another change that kind of comes about just as the result of the switch in mediums, right? The conversation where it's revealed that like, oh yeah, Max got his leg caught in a bear trap is one of those conversations that you get from just kind of hanging around near Rusty after he's told you, hey, go get the registration form off the desk. Hold on. Go get the registration form off the desk while I attend to Max. If you just go, then, story progresses as normal. You have an additional conversation with Barry, and then you go back out and you give Rusty the registration form. But if you stick around, Alan asks what happened. And Rusty explains like, oh yeah, he got his leg caught in a bear trap because there's poachers in the area. This is the game, of course, rewarding you for your patience by advising you, hey, there's gonna be fucking bear traps. He also implies that there are... I don't know if it's in that conversation or the conversation that you have with him after he gives you the keys, but he also talks about how there's campers that have gone missing, thus implying more taken you're going to have to deal with. But again, in the book, you're not controlling Alan. You don't have to worry about walking around bear traps. But Alan still needs that sort of indication of, hey, you're not out of the fucking woods yet. You're gonna have to deal with some shit, in the form of Rusty being like, oh yeah, something got him last night. We are not sure what. But who boy did a number on the poor thing. So again, it's another one of those things that like serves the same purpose as what we got in the game. but is more adapted. This is another one of those sort of like practical adaptations for the novel format. Now, I don't know if specifying that Barry was looking at Rose's ass was a necessary adaptational choice, but it was a choice that they made. And sometimes we just need to accept things in life, even if those things are specifying that Barry is in fact a horn dog. Let's continue. Chapter 9. A half hour later, Barry and Wake pulled up in front of a rundown A-frame with a rough-hewn porch. No other cabins nearby, just the surrounding forest. High up in a fir tree overlooking the cabin, a trio of ravens silently watching them get out of the car, heads cocked as though discussing something. "What's their problem?" said Barry, pointing at the huge birds, their feathers glossy black in the sunshine. "All part of the beauty and wonder of nature," said Wake, his voice light but his thoughts heavy. Last night it seemed like every attack of the Taken was preceded by those damn birds squawking. He grabbed his bags out of the back of the car and started up the steps to the cabin. Rusty had given him a key, but the cabin was unlocked. Wake pushed open the door, kicked his boots on the welcome mat before entering. The place smelled faintly of burnt pine and crisp bacon. The cabin was clean enough anyway. A sagging sofa in the living room, a kitchen table with 2 chairs downstairs. The remains of a fire were in the fireplace, a few singed logs and ashes. Wake trudged upstairs, Barry following him. At the peak of the A-frame were a couple of double beds, sheets and blankets neatly folded on them. A plaque on the wall read, "Treat Mother Nature with love," in burned-in letters. Barry sneezed at the top of the stairs. "I hate nature." I gotta make a gross noise real quick. My nose is just weirdly stuffy today. Okay. Wake went into the small bathroom. He removed the bandage from his forehead. The wound wasn't too bad. He touched it gently, winced. He started the shower, walked out while the water got warm. Barry was downstairs now, complaining about what the dust was doing to his allergies. After taking a shower, Wake changed into clean clothes, applied a fresh bandage, and laid down on the unmade bed. He tried to sleep, but his mind wouldn't turn off. It never did. He turned over, playing and replaying things, trying to make sense of what had happened at Birdleg Cabin. He lay on his side, hearing Barry banging around in the kitchen. The bed was too soft. How could anybody be expected to sleep in that? He tucked the pillow under his head, breathing slowly as the day spooled out, the late afternoon sun leaking through the curtains. He yawned. He dreamed of Alice. They were walking along a street in a strange city, the sun shining down on them. They were holding hands, Alice laughing, dragging him along to some place she wouldn't tell him. He was happy to be with her, always happy when they were together, but he didn't like where they were or where they were going. The buildings were falling apart, the windows of the apartments filthy. Alice didn't seem to mind, though, skipping ahead of him when he lagged behind, beckoning, calling him a fraidy cat. No cars on the streets, no taxis, which bothered him too, and there was trash everywhere, old newspapers billowing down the sidewalks. He snatched a paper as it tumbled past, the pages brittle and yellowing, the words in a foreign language, a language he didn't recognize at all. Alice kept walking, too far ahead for comfort. He chased after her, but she eluded him effortlessly, her feet dancing over the cracked pavement so that he couldn't keep up. She was singing something, some old song, a familiar old song. He ran full speed after her, trying to keep up, but getting further and farther behind. She looked back at him as she danced away, the wind carrying her song, and he finally recognized it now. It wasn't a song. There were no words. It was the sound of someone typing. Someone frantically typing. Wake jerked away, his heart about to burst inside him. It was dark outside, but the lights were on in the cabin. He wanted to close his eyes, try to get back to the dream, see if he could catch up with Alice. "You okay, Al?" Wake saw Barry seated on the bed opposite him. I'm fine." "You snore, Al. Anybody ever tell you that?" "Yeah. Wake's heart still pounded. His clothes felt soaked with sweat. Alice used to tell me that. Oh, said Barry, suddenly downcast. Sorry about that. I've been thinking. He sneezed, wiped his nose. I think you should call the police. Let them meet the kidnapper. That's what they're paid to do. Wake checked the wound on his forehead in the mirror. It didn't look too bad. I got a client, Al. A former FBI agent, said Barry. He's a lousy writer, but I could give him a call. Wake picked up the revolver on the nightstand, made sure it was loaded. I'm handling it. That's what I'm worried about, said Barry, still sitting on the bed. You got a knot on your head, a gun in your hand, and you're talking crazy. Don't get me wrong, Al. It's a good story, but when you start confusing fiction with reality, you could be looking at real problems. Men in white coats kind of problems. Wake checked his watch. It was after 11. He should be leaving soon. At the visitor center, Rusty had told him that Lover's Peak was at the end of the nature trail. Keep your eyes on the radio antenna, Mr. Wake. It's right below that. He wasn't sure how long it was going to take to walk there in the dark, but he wanted to get there before the kidnapper. He started down the stairs. That's it? Said Barry, jumping off the bed and following him down the stairs into the main room. You're not going to say anything? There's nothing to say. Wake grabbed his jacket. No hard feelings, either. If I were you, I'd think I was nuts, too. He could see that Barry was clearly scared for him, but there was nothing he could do to put his mind at ease. Nothing he could do to put his own mind at ease, either. He just had to go forward. It was like writing a novel, one chapter at a time, without thinking about the obstacles or problems, without letting himself get distracted, without thinking of how it might end, without wondering if the good guys won or the good guys lost, because if you thought about all those things, you'd be overwhelmed. No, like writing a book, the only way to get Alice back was to just move forward. I'm doing what I have to do, that's all. It doesn't matter what anybody else says to you, does it? Barry sneezed. Alan Wake is going to do exactly what Alan Wake wants. I don't have a choice, Barry. Not if I want to find Alice. Barry slowly nodded his head. I get it. He suddenly dashed into the kitchen. Let me make you a peanut butter sandwich before you go. I went back to the visitor center for supplies while you slept. You look like you haven't eaten a thing in days. Wake watched Barry pull jars of peanut butter and jelly out of the refrigerator and set them on the counter. He grabbed a loaf of bread, pulled a knife out of the drawer. If you're going out to hunt dragons, you should at least do it on a full stomach. That's what my mother always said. I'm not hunting dragons, Barry. Barry slathered peanut butter on 3 pieces of bread, added glops of grape jelly, and piled it all together, and then sliced it diagonally with a knife, just the way his mother used to. Oh, God. Oh, that cough snuck up on me. I haven't had a triple-decker PBJ since I was in 6th grade. Oh, wow. Okay. Said Wake, starting in on one half of the sandwich. Good, he said, chewing noisily. He was ravenous. Very good. Barry poured him a glass of milk. Drink this before your mouth sticks together. I don't want to have to Heimlich you. Oh, Alan Wake having a PBJ Sammy and milk. Why did I say that like that? Okay. I don't think that works with peanut butter. Wake finished the PBJ, licked his fingers clean. Don't look so upset. I'm going to be fine. Why should I be upset? Said Barry, voice rising. You're my best friend, Al, and at best you've got some kind of concussion, and you're hiking off into the night to meet with a man who may have kidnapped your wife. At worst, you're meeting kidnapper by yourself, no cops, no backup, while dodging maniacs swinging axes at your head. That about sum things up? Wake hefted the revolver. You forgot the part about me being armed and dangerous. I have some more mashed potatoes. 1 second. I talked to your buddy, Rusty the Ranger, when I went back to the lodge, said Barry. He said some campers have gone missing in the last couple days. He tell you that? No, he didn't tell me. Wake felt a lump of ice cream. Ice cream? Am I okay? Wake felt a lump of ice form inside him, the cold spreading. He tucked extra ammunition in his jacket, extra batteries for the flashlight, too. Wouldn't matter if he did. He said there's places back in the woods where the locals have set out bear traps, said Barry. They're not supposed to, but they do it anyway. Traps are hard to see in the daylight, almost impossible to see at night. He thinks that may be what happened to the missing campers. Wake thought of the hunter last night in the logging camp, and the man writhing in the sawdust as he begged Stucky for his life. He remembered the sound of the axe chunking into the hunter's chest, and Stucky's gleeful voice as he did it, jabbering on about cabin deposits and no cancellations. There had been ravens in the trees, screeching as Stucky chopped away at the hunter, as though urging him on. Not a half hour later and the hunter was coming after Wake, his chest erupting as he tried to kill him. The hunter had taken now, just like Stucky. I hope that's what happened to them. You hope so? I'd rather they were holed up with a broken leg than the alternative. Those taken guys? Wake nodded, Barry sneezed. Bless you, said Wake. This place is gonna kill me. Or this place is trying to kill me. Barry noisily blew his nose. I got such a migraine you wouldn't believe. He rubbed his temples. Right, there's mold in here, spores, poison ivy, God knows what. Take care of yourself. Wake started to leave, the wood floor creaking with every step. Make sure you keep the door locked and the lights on. Barry picked up his red parka from the sofa. Not so fast, Kimasabe. I've decided to come with you. You're staying here. What? Now you're telling me where I can go and I can't go? Blustered Barry. I'm not scared of the woods, and if that's what you're worried about. You scared of the woods? Heaven forbid. I'm not, insisted Barry. I ride subways, pal. Any time of the day or night. I get off at stops where the cops have to travel in pairs. I eat pushcart hot dogs, footlongs too, with sauerkraut and piccalilli. Pickle what? I'm not scared of anything. You're a braver man than I am, but I need you to stay here, Wake said quietly. The kidnapper said if he saw anyone else with me that he'd kill Alice. Besides, if something happens to me, if I don't come back, I need you to call Sheriff Breaker and tell her what happened. I'm not going to have to make any call, Barry hugged him. You'll bring Alice back. I know you will. Does this mean we're going steady or something? Barry let his hand go. Yes! Real funny. He pulled out his keys. Here, take the car. I'll be going through the woods. Only way to get to Lover's Peak. Barry put the keys back in his pocket. You go on your little nature hike, wise guy. I'll be fine. Alone. Here's Barry, alone in the woods, stuck in a dusty old cabin straight from a horror movie. With a toilet that doesn't work all that well, by the way. Wake opened the door. Flicked on the lights. Flicked on the flashlight to make sure it worked. See you later. Remember what I said about keeping all the lights on? Sure, Al. I'll hold down the fort until you come back, called Barry, flipping on more lights. Or until I get sliced and diced by some guy with a chainsaw. There's editors in New York who'd get a big laugh out of that. Barry Wheeler puree. That'd make their day. Wake heard Barry lock the door behind him as he stepped down from the porch. He glanced back at the lights inside, then headed off into the darkness. Sheriff Sarah Breaker trusted her gut, and her gut said that FBI agent Nightingale was an asshole. He felt wrong, and it wasn't just the smell of stale booze. It was the way he flashed his badge, pulling rank, and the look in his eyes when he wanted answers. Where was Alan Wake? What was this about a car crash? Where was his wife? And most importantly, why did she let Wake go? He wouldn't answer her questions. Federal business was all he would say. Okay. So not really a whole lot in this chapter that we haven't kind of already discussed. Barry brings up the campers missing, the bear traps, and everything. Further moving around conversational pieces from the game. We get a bit of explanation as to just kind of like what happens between them getting the cabin and Alan leaving. Because in the game, they get the cabin, then it cuts to nighttime. Alan knocks over a lamp saying, "Damn it, Barry, they'll kill her." And then he leaves. But most importantly, Barry makes Alan a PB&J sandwich. Like, what? Okay. So the reason for this is pretty clear, right? At least to me. You know? Alan's an asshole. Barry's kind of an asshole. But you know what? They're also supposed to be friends. Like best friends. Like really good friends. And I suppose there's worse ways to kind of reinforce that friendship than having one of them make the other food. You know, concerned about them eating right. But it's such a weird scene to, like, give as much emphasis as they do. Like, the narrative grinds to a halt as they discuss this sandwich that Barry is making for Alan. How it's a triple-decker PBJ sandwich. There's peanut butter, there's jelly, there's 3 pieces of bread. He slices it diagonally, just like his mama used to make. It says some line about going out and fighting dragons and not wanting to do so on an empty stomach. Like, it's just... Up until now, with how, like, Alan's been kind of a douche to everybody that he's met. Which, I mean, on some level is kind of fair. He's dealing with a lot. And Barry hasn't exactly been very helpful. He's been dismissive of Alan's concerns, talking about, like, how he might, if he talks to anybody about this, it could get him committed, talking about how, like, I want to take you to Seattle, get you to see a neurologist. So he hasn't exactly been supportive. So they gotta, I suppose they have to throw us a bone here a little bit. But it's such a weird thing to focus on this, like, because how much space does that take up, them talking about this fucking sandwich? That's like more than half a page of Barry preparing, like, this is the one thing, this is a game based on a Remedy property that has a nightmare sequence in it, where he's walking through a ruined city trying to keep up with Alice while she is skipping ahead, making typewriter noises with her mouth. And the one thing that I can't get out of my head from this fucking chapter is Barry making Alan a PBJ Sammy and a glass of milk because he's epic. I'm losing my fucking mind here. Why is this sticking in my mind so much? Why is the peanut butter jelly sandwich scene sticking out to me so much? It's all I'm thinking about now. All I'm thinking about is this fucking peanut butter and jelly sandwich that they're describing Barry making for Alan and then cutting it diagonally. Like, it's just like, here's your lunch, have a good day at school, fighting shadow creatures. And then they hug, and Alan makes a joke. It's just like, what are you, gay? And it's just like, why not? Why not, Alan? What are you, a homophobe? Why shouldn't Alan and Barry date? I suppose Alan is in an, as far as we know, monogamous marriage to his wife, who is currently missing. So maybe that would probably be a good reason for them not to date. But, like, why you guys say, does this mean we're going steady now? Come on, fuck off. Fuck off. Alright, let's head into the next chapter. Not really a whole lot going on with that one, so not a whole lot to talk about. Let's go ahead and crack into this last chapter, or this chapter that's going to be our last one for the day. How many chapters are in this? 25, 26, and an epilogue. Okay, so if we keep at this, like, 5 or so chapters a day, maybe, every other week, we should be done with this in, like, 3 more streams. So, chapter 10. Wake saw the dim lights of the visitor center through the trees as he walked up the path from the cabin. He glanced at his watch. The path to Lover's Peak was at the end of the nature trail that started behind the visitor center. He still had plenty of time before he met with the kidnapper. Ravens cawed in the darkness, and he felt a sharp pain lance through his head, as though the birds were screeching inside his skull. Then the ground started rolling under him, a tremor at first, building until it was so powerful that Wake had to hang onto a tree to stay upright, hanging on so tightly that his cheek was scraped raw. The lights at the visitor center flickered, and then went dark. His phone rang. Moshi Moshi? No, he says hello. Ow! Barry's voice crackled from the phone. Do you feel that? Yeah, said Wake, still dizzy, feeling like he had to throw up. Stay where you are. What? Shouted Barry. Can't hear. Breaking up. I said... The phone went dead. Wake was tempted to go back to the cabin, not wanting to risk being in the woods when the next quake hit or an aftershock. Then the screaming began from the visitor center, and Wake knew he couldn't go back. He ran toward the sound, kicking up gravel in his haste. Wake had his revolver out, his flashlight too. The road opened out to a scene of total destruction. A wrecked car rolled slowly down the road, a car alarm blaring. Rusty's Jeep had crashed into the front of the visitor center, slamming halfway through one window. Hood crumpled, the engine still racing. Downed power cables swayed over the parking lot, sparks arcing in the night. The Elderwood National Park Visitor Center sign was splintered, hanging at an angle. The phone booth out in front seemed to have exploded, the receiver embedded into the side of the building. The screams were weaker now, more of a whimper coming from the inside. Wake followed the beam of the flashlight, walked slowly into the visitor center, feet crunching on broken glass with every step. He checked behind him, kept moving. The skull of Bucktooth Charlie, the mastodon skeleton on display in the lobby, had fallen free from the rest of him, the gigantic curved tusks gleaming in the dim light. The map stand had been upended, shelves knocked down. Souvenirs and postcards lay scattered everywhere. The air inside stank of rotten meat, as though something had drowned and after been picked over by crabs and other scuttling things, had finally washed ashore. Hello? Shouted Wake. Anybody here? Help! Called someone called from farther inside. Please! Wake moved closer. There. A man sat against the windows along the back wall of the cafe, his head slumped forward. Wake hurried toward him, shining the flashlight on the man's face. The man held up one hand, shielding his eyes from the light. Blood was splashed across the windows behind him, more blood soaking his green uniform. His fingers twitched toward the pistol that lay beside him. Mr. Wake? Rusty. Wake bent down beside the park ranger. The stain on Rusty's jacket was growing, spreading out. What happened? The whole place started shaking. Rusty held his midsection with both hands, blood oozing between the fingers. I thought it was an earthquake, but then my car started up with no one in it. What's going on, Mr. Wake? Wake tried his phone again. No signal. Where's the first aid kit? This logger came at me with an axe, wailed Rusty, his broken leg twisting under him at an impossible angle. He just started swinging. I shot him, Mr. Wake. First time I ever used my gun in the line of duty. But it didn't do any good. His lower lip trembled. How can that be? Wake heard movement outside, shined his flashlight through the windows. There was nobody there, just the darkness. That was enough. What good's a gun when they won't die? Rusty pulled a piece of paper out of his jacket, held it out. The manuscript page was soggy with blood. I don't understand, Mr. Wake. Everything that happened. It's just the way it was on this page I found. Wake flattened out the manuscript page. The type smeared from the blood, but Rusty's name was clear. Rusty did his best, but taken. Unfazed by. The Taken's axe sheared. Ranger screamed. I'm afraid the logger's coming back, Mr. Wake. Where's the first aid kit? Said Wake. Put the lights on, Mr. Wake, please! I can't, Rusty. The power lines are all down. But I've got a flashlight and extra batteries. We're going to be okay. Hey, what's up?
Not much.
Nothing? Oh, okay.
I was going to say not much, but nothing as well. So, Numuffin?
Numuffin?
Bye.
Bye. We're going to be okay. Just tell me where the first aid kit is so I can patch you up. Patch me up? Rusty laughed and blood poured from his mouth. Sure, you can do that. He waved toward the front of the visitor center. Manager's office. On the wall. His head flopped to one side, too heavy for him to support it now. I wish Rose was here. I should have told her. Told her sooner how I feel about her. Wake patted Rusty's shoulder, then made his way across the courtyard to the manager's office. He rummaged through the room by the light of the flashlight and had just picked up the first aid kit when the whole building shook again. A tall metal cabinet fell over, nearly pinning him. He heard Rusty pleading, his voice suddenly drowned out by an explosion that threw Wake against the desk. By the time Wake got back to the cafe, Rusty was gone, just a long smear of blood left behind on the floor. Wake stood there, staring at the blood. Rusty had begged him not to leave, said that the logger that had attacked him would be coming back, and Wake, even with all he knew, all he had seen for himself, had gone for bandages. Wake felt a cool breeze against the back of his neck. He turned and saw that a hole had been blown through one wall, big enough to drive a truck through. Wake cautiously touched the raw edges of the opening, then stepped through and out onto the grass, the softness of the ground oddly comforting. There was nothing he could do for Rusty. Probably never had been. He could still see the painted amusement on the ranger's face as he repeated, "Patch me up?" The trail to Lover's Peak started right there, right through that wooden gate. Wake started toward it.
Fishing is only permitted for those visitors who purchase a park fishing license,
warbled someone, the voice distorted. Wake looked around, finally glanced up, saw a man pacing on the roof, his face covered in shadows.
It is against the law to remove any natural objects or historical artifacts from the park grounds,
said the man, hefting a double-bladed axe. It was Rusty. Rusty! Rusty, please don't! Rusty dropped down from the roof, landing as lightly as though he were made of smoke.
It is forbidden to remove rocks you may find along the river, or even simple berries, sir!
Wake backed up toward the gate, but Rusty cut him off.
Obey the park ranger's instructions at all times,
said Rusty, advancing on him. Wake shone the flashlight on him, and Rusty cowered, threw an arm in front of his face. I'm sorry, said Wake. I shouldn't have left you. Rusty charged, the axe swooshing through the air. Wake caught him in the glare of the flashlight, shot him. The shadow that shielded Rusty, the shadow that filled him, animated him, disintegrated in the light. Rusty flinched, unprotected now, but came at him again.
Obey the park!
Wake shot him again and again as Rusty stood frozen in the light, shot him until the creature had once been a park ranger dissolved in the night, leaving only the fading echo of his voice behind. Wake looked around and started reloading. His hands were steady as he slipped the bullets into the cylinders, steadier than he felt. He had killed Stucky, killed other Taken, but that was different. He didn't know them. He had talked with Rusty, seen him shyly flirting with Rose in the Oh Dear Diner that first day, noticed the way Rusty watched her over the rim of his coffee mug. A beautiful moment, the kind of thing a novelist noted, something to be used later, in a book that hadn't been written. Wake had been there as Rusty tenderly cared for the injured dog, soothing the poor animal with his touch and his voice. Now Wake had killed him. Killed the thing Rusty had become. Wake wiped his eyes and pushed open the gate. All the tears in the world weren't going to bring back the park ranger. He had Alice to think about now. Wake had taken barely a dozen steps down the nature trail when the ground shook again, a monstrous roar pounding through the forest. The trees quaked as though buffeted by a storm. Just as suddenly the forest grew quiet, utterly still, not even a breath of wind. Wake checked his watch and hurried on, the path rising steadily through the trees, past picnic tables and trash cans, trailside displays of flora and fauna, laminated maps marked with arrows saying, "You are here." Wake kept moving. It seemed like all he had done for days now was keep moving, wherever the path leads, as long as it led to Alice. He slowed, head cocked, then stopped, his flashlight glinting on something just ahead. He walked closer, shining the flashlight across the path. A bear trap lay in the grass beside the path, jaws wide, ragged teeth shining in the light. Rusty had warned him about old traps scattered across the forest. Most of the trappers who had set them were long gone now. The trap was huge, but as big as it was, without the flashlight, Wake would have walked right into it. Even if he managed to pry the jaws open, he'd be bleeding, his ankle broken, dragging one leg behind him. Easy prey for the Taken. Wake nudged the trap with the toe of his boot, and the jaws snapped shut, the sound too loud for comfort. Wake remembered Rusty dying on the floor of the lodge, trying to hold his guts in with both hands, whimpering for Wake to please help him. Wake hadn't been able to do the ranger any good. He turned his head now, listening for sounds in the trees. Maybe killing Rusty after he'd become a Taken was as much of a kindness as Wake could manage. He started walking again, the flashlight beam swiveling back and forth across the trail. Wind rippled the trees, the darkness seeming to gather itself closer around him. Wake avoided another bear trap, and then another, this one better hidden, almost invisible in the weeds. The trail switched back up the mountain, finally bringing Wake to a cable car at the edge of a drop-off. A Lover's Peak arrow pointed down. He looked over, saw a cable stretched a couple 100 feet over a ravine to another landing below. The cable car looked rickety, with only a low railing to keep a rider from falling out. The use at your own risk, no horseplay sign above the landing didn't help to inspire confidence either. Wake pressed the button on the landing, and the cable car slowly moved toward him, making grinding noises as it got closer and closer. If Barry were here, he'd already be talking about lawsuits and deep pockets, and owning the whole town if the thing crashed onto the rocks below. Wake got in, closed the gate behind him, the cable car swaying now. Wake's stomach was doing backflips that would do the Romanian gymnastics team proud. He pressed a button in the car, tightly gripping the sides as it lurched across the chasm. Caw. Wake looked up, saw a raven approaching on silent wings, unhurried. A few moments later, there were a dozen ravens in the sky circling overhead. He pressed the button in the car as though that would make it go faster. More ravens now, an enormous flock of them, blocking out the stars, more of them gathering as he watched. Caw. 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 The swarm of ravens swooped down at him, shadows leaking out of them, screeching, beating at him with their wings. He tried to duck, but they attacked again, and he felt one of them land on the back of his neck, tearing at him with its beak. Blood pouring from his ear, Wake cursed, turned his flashlight on the ravens, stunned to find them flaring up and disappearing, just like the Taken. He fought waves of ravens with the flashlight beam alone, killing them by the dozens, but they still kept coming, swarming the cable car, their shadows filling the night. The cable car shuddered, came to a brief halt. It hung there for a moment, suspended above the ravine, before something gave way and it started screeching down the cable faster and faster. Wake held on, bracing himself for impact. The cable car hit hard, sending Wake tumbling out onto the ground, end over end, his flashlight flying. He lay there stunned for a moment, trying to breathe. The wind knocked out of him. He groaned as he slowly got to his knees, picking up his flashlight. His revolver was gone. He looked around in panic and spotted it near the cable car. Still disoriented, Wake could only crawl toward the revolver on his hands and knees. Almost there. Almost there now. A worn, hobnailed boot tromped on the revolver, then kicked it over the edge and into the ravine. Wake stared at the mud-crusted boot, groggy, thinking that someone should tell him that his laces were untied. Wouldn't want to trip. He looked up. A Taken stood beside the cable car, gripping a hand sickle. He must have been part of a work crew in the park, keeping the trails clear, but that was before he had become part of the darkness. He started toward Wake, the blade of the sickle shiny in the moonlight, sharp enough to shave with. Wake fumbled at the flashlight. The Taken loomed over him, muttering, the sickle raised high. Wake flicked on the flashlight, turned it on the Taken. The darkness peeled away from the Taken, but it still had the strength to swing the sickle down. Wake threw up his arm, a futile attempt to protect himself. There was a crack like thunder, and the Taken rocked backwards, its outlines shimmering. Another thunderclap, and the Taken erupted in light. Wake looked over his shoulder, saw a man standing there with a pistol, smoke curling out of the barrel. Ellen shivered as the wind kicked up. A sweater and jacket should have been plenty to ward off the chill, but it was so cold the stars looked jagged. Well, that's science, Ellen, she told herself. You have to be prepared for anything. Ellen wasn't weird, no matter what the other 7th graders said. No matter what her mother said, either. Her mind just turned things over differently, which was why she now sat alone in the forest with her ears plugged and a tape recorder beside her. Soon, Ellen would know the answer to the question. If a tree falls in the middle of the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? The alder trees rattled against each other in the wind like finger bones. Ellen pushed her earplugs in further. Every time it stormed, some scrawny adlers toppled over. She just had to be here when it happened, and let the recorder provide the proof if they actually made a sound when they fell. She shivered again, the temperature falling by the second, colder and colder. Kinda creepy in the darkness, but scientists had to be brave. She turned, thought she saw something off in the trees, but there was only darkness. She rubbed her arms, trying to bring the heat back, but the cold drifted deeper inside her. The wind rose sharply, sent the trees clattering against each other, the sound so loud she heard it through her earplugs. She wondered if that would ruin the experiment. Her teeth chattered. She wanted to leave, to get up and run home, but the cold rolled over her like an icy mist. The cold, clinging, and dark. Her breath was frost in the air as she stood up, knees shaking. She tried to get her bearings, but nothing looked right. Nothing looked familiar. What had happened to the stars? It looked like somebody had pulled the plug on heaven. All right, so this chapter does something actually really interesting. So I talked before about how Alan Wake is generally praised as a video game for integrating storytelling and gameplay in a really good way, right? Um, but even still, there's certain times where things are a bit lacking. I would argue that one of those things that's kind of lacking is the connection with some of the characters that become taken. Listen, you do meet Rusty a couple of times in the narrative before he becomes a taken. You meet him in the Oh Dear Diner, you meet him when you go to rent a cabin, and you meet him again when he's lying on the floor dying of blood loss. Rusty originally had a much bigger um, role in the game. During one of the earlier iterations of the narrative, Alan Wake is a game that was in development for 5 years, roughly. And in that time, there were a lot of trailers released, and there's plenty of times when, like, the game looks completely different from what we ended up getting. Like, I would argue that, like, some of the earliest trailers of Alan Wake almost make it look like a Source Engine mod. But as the game goes on, or as time goes on, it begins to congeal, and they have to make like certain cuts to the story, change things around. The lighthouse in his dream at the beginning was originally a much more important place. See, in earlier versions of the game, Rusty was a much more prominent character. He meets with you and mentions that he's found a lot of your pages and he wants to give them to you, but he's keeping them in the lighthouse for safekeeping. And then he fucking dies. Rusty consistently doomed by the narrative. um but with the final iteration of the game, Rusty's place in the narrative needed to be reduced considerably. So now he's just kind of the guy that you meet a couple times and he gives you the keys to the cabin in Elderwood, and then he dies. One of the things that the book does really well that they don't really do in the game, because like as much as you get a lot of Alan's sort of like internal monologue in the game, most of the time he's just kind of describing things that are happening. He'll sometimes like give his opinion on what's happening, but it's more narration than like kind of going over his emotional state, describing things that aren't particularly clear. Like if he's got like a headache, it'll describe what the headache is like, that sort of thing. But the book does a really good job of kind of hammering home just how different Rusty's death is from other deaths in the story so far. Like, Wake describes it really well. He's killed other Taken. Or, well, I say Wake describes it. Rick Burroughs does a good job of, like, kind of hardline establishing, like, exactly kind of what's going on here. He's killed other Taken. He killed Stucky. He didn't know any of them, though, to any sort of degree. But he knew in the small amount of time that he had been in Bright Falls, he'd gotten to know Rusty. One second. Oh, hold on. That's not how that's spelled. 1 second. There we go. So, like, even though they didn't really interact a whole lot, like, he mentions seeing the way that Rusty looked at Rose over the rim of his coffee mug, seeing the way he handled bandaging up Max after his leg had been injured, um, and just all of these little moments that he goes out of his way to say, these are the sort of things writers love, these little moments that are tell so much about a person, and just how they interact with their world, and it really hammers it home in a way that the game doesn't. And that's not really like a slight against the game, really. At that point, Rusty is essentially a boss fight, you know. He's your first interaction with the shifting Taken, the ones that like speed all over the fucking place. Which he doesn't do in the book, interestingly enough. I can't say for sure that there aren't going to be Taken like that as we go through the story, but in the book, Rusty isn't one of them. And honestly, like, I really like this. Because Rusty is a tragic character in both the book and the game. Like, he's not there for very long. He's dead, like I said, he's dead midway through episode 2. But you do kind of get the sense for the kind of character that he is, and you find pages talking about him, talking about his relationship with Rose, that sort of thing. So, it is really, it's rough, you know? The book's just a little bit better at kind of like hammering home, like, hey, yeah, this is different. He's not like other Taken. He plays video games. No, he's not, he's nothing like what Wake has dealt with so far. And it's something that like kind of drills home. The longer Wake stays here, the more he's going to deal with shit like this. The more people he meets in Bright Falls is essentially more potential enemies, more things that the darkness can use against him. And this is kind of like his first moment of like realizing that. Because again, he didn't know any of the other Taken. He didn't fucking know Stucky. Like, up to that point, the Taken that he knew the best was the guy who got his fucking chest cleaved in half. Also, the book doesn't explicitly say that Max was killed when Stucky broke out of the visitor center. So as far as we're concerned, Max is alive in the book version of events. One last thing I want to mention, and this has been on my mind since they've been talking about like the kinds of axes wielded by the Taken. They keep saying double-bladed axe, and I know what that means. I know what that means. But it keeps making me think about, so before I knew what fan fiction was, when I was a kid, there were a couple instances of me reading fan fiction. I remember specifically reading, I think, Super Smash Bros. Fan fiction that was describing a battle between Fox and Dark Link. And they specifically described Dark Link as having a double-edged sword, which, like, the Master Sword is a double-edged sword. It has edges on both sides of the blade. But I didn't know what specifically a double-edged sword was when I was a kid. I feel like I've told this story before, because what I thought they were talking about was a sword that, like, halfway up the blade splits into, like, a Y shape and curves back in on itself for some reason, that particular fanfic lives rent-free in my head because it has a line where Fox gets his fucking head chopped off, and Dark Link says something like, "How do you expect to beat me if you don't have a head?" Which, like, even at the time that I read that, like, all I can think of just like, that's a really dumb thing to say. You cut his head off. How's he gonna fucking answer you, idiot? But anyways, that's going to be it for today. I want to thank everybody for coming by the stream. I hope you all had a good time. I know I did. If you enjoyed the stream, you can subscribe here on Twitch. We have special emotes for subscribers. You can also follow me on Twitter and Tumblr at AcidXShark. That's AcidXShark, where I post the streams as they happen. And you can follow me on YouTube at AcidXShark, where I post the streams after they happen. Art for the stream was done by Audrey and B of Team Catpull for the VTuber. You can find them on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube at Team Catpull. That's TEAMCATPLE. If you want a commission, use their commission form. Don't email them. They'll email you. And if you DM them, please don't be weird. Please don't be weird to my friends. I'm begging you not to be weird. B's birthday is tomorrow. So, like, wish her a happy birthday, maybe. Tell her happy birthday. She's my friend. She's my friend, and she deserves a happy birthday. Like, don't we all? But, like, B especially, since it's their birthday, specifically. The chalkboard for the recap space was done by my lovely wife, Natalie, who you can find on Twitter at GhostyNaps. It's GHOSTIENAPS. She is a delight, and she's dealing with some medical stuff right now. So keep her in your thoughts. She's doing good right now, but, like, medical stuff is medical stuff, and medical stuff is almost never fun to deal with. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here. Do I know anybody streaming right now? I don't think I know anybody streaming right now. Why am I saying streaming? Stramming. I'm gonna sneeze. Excuse me. That was cuter than I anticipated it being. Oh, is Ganon streaming? Maybe we'll raid Ganon. Hold on. Friend of the stream, CDI Ganon, she is playing Final Fantasy IV. Let me go ahead and set that up. Upcoming streams, tomorrow, Fatal Frame 4, next Wednesday, Hyrule Warriors, next Thursday, A Plague Tale Requiem, next Friday, probably Bayonetta. So, I'll see you next time on the Sharkstream. Same Shark time, same Shark channel. Take care, everybody.